Okay, let's look at rounding decimals. So first of all, I'm going to start with a question that is not decimals. Just a little reminder of what we were doing before. Here is a number. If you were asked to round it, at the moment you couldn't, because you have to know what you're rounding to be able to round something. So you need to search for wherever it is hidden in the word problem to what you're going to round to. Round to the nearest, let's say 100 this time. So once you know you're rounding a number to the nearest 100, you get your hats on up to the hundreds. There's the hundreds. You oval that column, oval it, and as I said in the previous video, the rounding video, we'll sort out this column first. What happens to this 6? It's either going to stay as a 6 or it might go up to a 7. That's the only things that could happen. So the answer could be 45,600 or it could be 45,700. It only has a weak little 3 next to it, so it's going to stay as a 6. It's going to be 45,600. So one way you can do it is you sort out this column, stays as a 6, and then it's copy whatever's in front of the oval and place zeros, because it needs to look round after all. Round numbers should look round, so we get 45,600. So that's how we do our rounding. It looks round, having these zeros on the end. Now we'll look at some decimal rounding. We can use exactly the same system when we're rounding with decimals. Here's a number, 5.678. 5.678. We can't do anything until we know what we've got to round to. Let's say that we have to round to the nearest unit. So I'm going to put my hats on. With decimal numbers, I often will line up the decimal point before I put my hats on. You don't have to. Units comes before the decimal point, units. And then afterwards we have tenths, hundredths and thousandths. Just one very important point is your parents are often going to talk about units, like Mr. Blom and myself do. We talk about units, but you also need to know that units is otherwise known as ones. So they might say round to the nearest 1. It's exactly the same as rounding to the nearest unit. So what I'm going to do is follow my normal system. I know what we're rounding to. We're rounding to the units column, the ones column. So I'm going to oval that column. With rounding with decimals, you line up the decimal point, because decimal points almost always we want to line those up. You line up the decimal point. Then we use the same system. What happens to this 5? Well, there's a strong digit next to it, the 6, so 5 will get pulled up to a 6. There's nothing to copy in front, and I'll place zeros on the end. Now you see that we end up with these zeros like we did when we were dealing with big whole numbers. So we've got 6.000. That is 6 point nothing. 6 point nothing at all. If we're rounding to the nearest unit, when you're doing a test, they're going to prefer you to round literally to the nearest unit. So just the units column. It is 6, isn't it? 6.000 is 6. So that's rounding 5.678 to the nearest unit. It could have been 5, but it turns out to be 6. Let's round a number to the nearest hundredth. It is 75.483. You need to know what to round to. I'm going to round it to the nearest hundredth. Nearest hundredth. Round to nearest 100th. So I need to put my hats on. If it's a decimal number, I normally put the point on top first, and then I get my units. Units and tens. Units and tens is before the decimal point. After the decimal point, you've got all the things that end in th. So tenths and hundredths and thousandths. You've got all the little bits. So you're going to be rounded to the nearest 100th. So we're rounded to this decimal column over here. It's quite a small value column. So what happens to this 8? It's got a 3 next to it. 3 is weak, so 8 is going to stay as an 8. We copy what's in front, lining up the decimal point. Place a 0 after. But when we're rounded to the nearest hundredth, we want to really stop in the hundredth column. So it's 75.48.
Yeah, they might say to you, round to the nearest second decimal point.
Oh, very good point, Mr.
And
Blom, yeah.
Despite the fact that 75.48 and the 0 not making an impact on the value of the number, the question is asked for you to round to 2 decimal places. So therefore, you can't have the third decimal place in there, even though it's just a 0. So be careful of that.
Yeah.
I've had a test where my children have got caught up with that, and I felt really bad for them because it was
as Mr. Blom
a
says,
cruel one, wasn't it?
you could be asked to round to the nearest hundredth, or you could be asked to round to 2 decimal places. It's the same thing, but you've got to know what it means.
Yeah.
Let's just carry on with that for a minute. If you were asked to round to the nearest tenth, they might also say round to 1 decimal place. To round to the nearest hundredth is 2 decimal places. I don't think you'll be asked this, but if you were to round to the nearest 1,000th, you're rounding to 3 decimal places. Let's do a very complicated example. This is perhaps one of the most difficult ways you'll be asked to round using this method, although you may well be able to see the answer quite easily. Let's say you had to round to the nearest 1. I'll call it a 1 this time. A 1 is of course a unit. Round to the nearest 1, that's rounded to the nearest unit. So I put my hats on: units, tenths, hundredths and thousandths. Now in truth, if you're looking at that, 5.999 is extremely close to 6. I can tell the answer is going to be 6, and many of you probably can as well. But I want to show you how this method works when it's quite difficult with the method, this one. So round to the nearest 1. I get an oval round here. I'm going to line up my decimal point. What happens to the 5? It gets pulled up to a 6. Copy what's in front. 0, 0, 0. Okay. I was completely wrong with this. I thought this would be difficult. Actually turned out to be extremely easy because you didn't have to pull in the 9s up. I think we should probably cancel that one, Mr. B.
No, it's fine. Let's keep that. It would be more challenging if this question was the exact same, but they'd say to you round to the nearest second place value or to round to the nearest 100th. Because then what you'd be doing is, if you want to just type for me.
Let's do that.
Should we do it? We'll type that.
I was trying to plan an evil question. That's what I was trying to do.
And I'm the more evil one.
Yeah. I managed to make it into something that was actually not that difficult at all. So if I go back to where we were.
But I think it's important to know that though, that despite the riffraff of the 999, that it's simple enough for you to look, make sure that you keep the criteria, look at the number that you're running to, look next door, and make sure that you round up or stay the same. Identify your 2 different possibilities. So here we've got 5.999. Obviously, always put the hats and caps down. I'm a big fan.
What are we rounding to, Mr. Blum?
Oh, sorry, we're going to round to the nearest hundredth.
Right.
And if you just put with
I'm
that,
going to write it in words this time.
Yeah. Also put that to the second decimal place as well, because the hundredth is always the second decimal place.
They like to mix it up, don't they? In the tests.
They do.
Let's put these hats on. Personally, I put the point and the units first. It really doesn't matter if you know what you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
Tenths, hundredths. Make sure my 10s look like tenths. And thousandths. Make sure my zeros look like zeros, So this one should be a lot harder now because we're round to the nearest hundredth. I oval my hundredth column. And this is where the questions get hard, is when you've got to pull a 9 up. Because this 9 has a big 9 next to it, which means 9 is going to go up. Has to go up to a 0, but really it's going up to a 10, isn't it? The only thing you can have more than 9 is going to be 10. So 9 goes up to a 10 and you carry the 1. This rarely happens in rounding. It only happens when you pull a 9 up. So I'll copy what's in front. I'm going to go backwards actually, because 9 plus 1 is 10. We have to do a bit more carrying. And then 6 goes here. We'll also place a 0 at the end. Let's see what we've got. We want it to 2 decimal places, so 6.00.
And what's interesting here is that in the previous question, well, it's technically 6, but because of the 2 decimal places, we put the 2 zeros there the 2 placeholders there to make it to 2 decimal places. But the answers are both 6, despite being rounded off to different place values, which I think is quite interesting. And could be something of a reasoning question that we could ask to a higher ability level. But it's because of all those 9s. Because if we're running off to the nearest unit, we've got 5.999. We can clearly see that 5.999 is very clear to 6. If we said 5.999 is also, if we're looking at the hundredth, it's still close to the number that is 6, regardless of which one we're rounding it to.